The topic for this week is going to be due diligence. But we wanted to dig into it a little bit and help give everybody an idea of exactly what it is that we want to accomplish, what we want to perform when we're doing due diligence. And really, this would apply to either tax liens or tax deeds. Although with tax liens, the due diligence tends to be very simple once you can establish a few things. But when you're buying property, it's a little bit different story. When you're buying property, you want additional insurance. You need to watch out for other types of potential problems or issues that may arise. Essentially, when you're buying property, you want to do whatever you can to help avoid risk. And there are other things that we can do when we're doing the due diligence process. We're going through that, and other purposes that are served there. That's a time when we get details about properties. It is when we try to determine how much we think a property is worth, and also when we can set a maximum bid. Now, let's go ahead and get started. But when we talk about a couple of these things, just one thing I had in mind here is that I think one thing that we tend to forget sometimes is that we're buying these properties as wholesalers. So remember that when it comes to determining property value, uh, when it comes to determining these amounts, the exact numbers are not really important to us, and here's why. When you bought a home, if you've ever bought a home before, then when you go to do an evaluation on the property and have an assessment done on what you're going to pay, if you borrowed money to buy the home, then there's more than one party that's involved. They're borrowing money. There's money on the line, and people want to be sure that the property's worth what it's worth. So there are a lot of steps that you go through to determine exactly what the value is on the property, and the exact value is very important in that situation. In this situation, not so much. Now, why? Because we should be looking at a situation where uh, the property opens up at an assessed, at a bid to value ratio that's 10%. And if we're looking to buy it, we're looking to buy it for something under 30%, of its assessed value or estimated value. So the numbers are not quite as important as far as the exact value, meaning that we want to know roughly what the value of the property is, but to have it down exactly is not quite as important. As long as we can get a rough idea and know about what a property is worth or potentially worth, right now. Um, then also in setting maximum bids, we'll get a chance to kind of cover a lot of these things here as we talk. But what we really wanted to dig into and to provide was a type of due diligence checklist. So let's talk about what's necessary when you're thinking about buying a property, one of these tax sale properties. What are some of the steps you need to take? What are some of the things that are required, I think, in order to make a good decision? Um, the first one we have listed here are county and public records. These are often the same records that we'll begin pulling up whenever we look at a property. So we're talking about a lot of common things that we're probably all familiar with. This is a lot of the stuff that we do during the first step of the process here, which we're talking about obtaining the county records themselves, and that's most likely going to be divided into a couple of different parts. Um, the county property records will probably be divided into assessor's records, treasurer's records, basically information about the assessment and valuation of the property, and then information about the property taxes that have been paid and what's been owed in the past. Those will most likely be separate, but they'll still be important bits of information there that we can gather, along with other county information they may have on the property or information linked to the property. Um, some other things that we would gather quickly would be things like Google Earth images or map images, um, Zillow information. Zillow information will tell us a little bit about current evaluations or estimates on value. We gather a lot of this stuff, and it can be gathered pretty quickly, but we can get all of this there. That at least gives us some of the documentation to begin the process here of due diligence, so we can begin looking for any types of issues that may come up, so that we can get an idea of what the property is, what the condition is. Really, there's a lot of things that we can do. And it's never been easier to do than right now. I mean, really, the internet and a lot of these online tools that we're seeing are part of what's revolutionizing, I think, online investing in general when it comes to real estate. A lot of these things are making it easy to, to make decisions without making them completely blind. I mean, really, you can do quite a bit of research now on a property and not. You can do quite a bit of research as an out-of-state investor and not spend a ton of time doing it. That's pretty amazing that we can do that now. We can find out, we can find out a lot about a property within just a few minutes. So, by the way, if anybody has any questions here, I didn't even ask here to make sure that audio is broadcasting properly for everybody. I just kind of assumed it was. If there are any questions too, you guys feel free to ask. You're welcome to ask them in the questions section, chat section, wherever it is that you prefer to ask. Okay, so this side of it is something that we cover on a pretty regular basis. All this stuff so far, as far as some of the records we're going to pull up. So again, that's going to include county property records. That's going to include, which by the way, that's tax records and assessor's records. We're talking about getting some images of the property, trying to determine what the property boundaries are as well, which you can find out through the county records, get an idea of where the property lines are at. And then also Zillow information is part of what we're going to gather. Now, this next part in the due diligence process is an important one. Verify that the property is there. If you think about for a minute why that's kind of an important factor, think about this. Most of the time when properties go to a tax sale, it's not. I guess it's becoming a little bit more common, lately, but traditionally, it's never been something that's been common. It's not something that happens all the time, and that's because nobody wants to lose money on a property. And the more valuable a property is, the more likely it is that somebody will step in and pay it off. So in the past, most single-family homes wouldn't end up going to sales, although there would always be some that would. We've seen a pretty dramatic increase in the number of homes that are going to auction. But why would it be important to verify that the property is there, and what are we talking about with that? Well, if somebody decided to stop paying the property taxes on a property, it could be for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons you want to make sure that it's not because of a sudden or dramatic change in valuation due to something like a fire or some type of major problem with the property. Like, for instance, if it was a really old property and the county came in and said that it was no longer safe to live in and they needed to tear it down or something like that. That's something that would obviously change the valuation on the property pretty dramatically, maybe even faster than what the county has listed. So you want to make sure that there hasn't been something that's changed just recently and that the property is essentially no longer there. That's the main point that we want to get across there, is you just want to make sure that something hasn't happened dramatically to the property that would make it undesirable or that would make the taxes owed more than what the property was worth, which usually doesn't happen. But there's always that chance there, so it's one of those steps you want to take. Now, what's the easiest way to verify that a property is there? If you're working with other people, like team members, like for instance, you've got a realtor that you're working with in the area already, then that's something that they can typically do very easily, within a period of, if you give them some time to do it, then within a few days, it's not usually that hard to get done. And they're already working in the area. All you're really trying to do is just determine that the property is there. Maybe they can even take pictures for you, but you're basically trying to just make sure that there hasn't been something major that's happened or changed with the property. Aside from that, there's an amazing amount of information that we can find out just from a lot of the records that are available online, at least with a lot of properties. Not with every property, but with a lot of properties, we can see overhead images, satellite images, we can see street side images in a lot of cases. And in some cases, counties will keep records and some images of the property as well. Okay, so what exactly would the next step be? The next step would be to perform a comp on the property. to try to determine about what the property would be worth if it was in, I guess, what the property would be worth if you had a clear I mean, if you had a warranty deed on the property and you were selling it right now. That's basically what you're trying to determine there, is to get an idea of what other properties are selling in the area that are very similar in nature. So you're talking about properties that have typically the same number of bedrooms, bathrooms, maybe close to the same square footage. You're trying to get a determination of what the property's worth based on what else is sold out there on the market. And so there are a couple of different factors that come into play with that. I don't know, Steve, if you can hear, do you want to jump in here with anything on comps? I know you used to do that a lot.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great tools that are available now is the ability as just a normal investor to be able to pick up comparables or find that information. When I was a real estate agent back in the late 90s, early part of 2000, um, really to do a comparative market analysis was pretty tough to do unless you were a real estate agent because you didn't have access to the MLS. But now with some services, even like Zillow.com or Realtor.com, you can find comparables pretty easily. In fact, when you're looking up the property, um, Zillow will actually give you comparables. Now, you'll want to go through those comparables to see if they're similar within the same area and then do a comparative market analysis, but we teach you how to do that in the program. So if you want to review that, go back to the workshop manual, because in the workshop manual we'll discuss and teach how to do a comparative market analysis using 3 properties.
Yeah, and in fact, if you see where the arrows are pointing in this picture right here, what we're looking at is, if you pull up a record on Zillow and scroll down, you're going to see nearby sales listed down on the bottom, as well as nearby properties that are maybe currently listed for sale. But it'll typically have at least 2 examples of properties nearby sales. But you can also click on the where the bottom arrow is at, to see similar properties, and it'll pull up a list and basically provide the comps that it's using. That's one of the nice things about the Zillow software that they have, is that part of their valuation on a property, it's based on comps. It's based on what properties are actually selling for. So it's not always going to be dead on accurate. Sometimes there are problems with how Zillow has things priced, but that's how they have the website set up. That was the idea behind it, was for it to be able to estimate value based on comps. So that's an easy way to do some comps if you wanted to pull some of those up and see. But there are some things you want to look for when you're going to pull comps, because you want to make sure that the properties are really similar. That they're properties that at least are similar enough to use for a comp if you're trying to get an idea on value. Again, we don't have to know the exact value because we're not paying full price for the property. We're just trying to get a rough estimate of value so that we can make sure that we don't pay, too much, or we're not going to pay over basically what the percentage is that we're going to set on that.
Yeah, and as you're going through and you're filling out the comps, and you're finding comparable properties, you know, you'll evaluate each one of those properties and we'll determine, okay, well, this property sold for $100,000. How many square feet is it? And we'll determine what the average square foot is between all 3 of those properties. And so if, the average square foot is $90 to $100 per square foot, then we know that these properties are selling anywhere between $90 to $100 per square foot. If it's twice that, then that gives you an idea, because your property is going to be very comparable as well. If it's a 3-bedroom 2-bath and you're looking at similar 3-bedroom 2-baths, you have 3 properties that are very similar and they're all sold for $90 to $100 per square foot. Then you'll know that your property, based on properties that have actually sold, would probably sell anywhere between $90 to $100 per square foot if it was up on the open market.
Yeah. It's basically almost like a way to kind of verify or validate the value of it, is by looking at some likely examples. And really, a lot of these online tools now are making it so much easier. I mean, in the past, even like Steve mentioned, years ago, it just wasn't. A lot of these things just weren't available publicly. But now, they're there and also very easy to use. I mean, but I guess before it would have required more time. I think if you wanted to go through an MLS system and try to pull up different property sales and different information. But you can see that even with a resource like this, they've got a lot of those property sales already listed, and it's just easy. Something you can do in very little time. So aside from these things so far, okay, so far we pulled the different records that are available online. We've verified that the property's there. We've done some comps on it to determine about what we estimate the value to be at, and then comes up the title search. Now, what is it that we're trying to determine or find out with the title search? What is it that, I guess, what's our objective? If we know that we're looking for, I think I'm sure that everybody understands the general concept. We do a title search to try to avoid risks, but what exactly are the risks? What are we really talking about with that? What is it that you should be looking for as you do this research on different properties? Well, really, to be able to answer that, I think you have to have a pretty good understanding of the foreclosure process, or at least different aspects of it, in order to really understand the risks that are out there. So let's just talk about foreclosure for a second and see if it helps to answer the question of what we're looking for whenever we do any kind of a title search, whenever we're looking at these properties, trying to determine if there are any potential risks. First off, if we're talking about foreclosure, I was looking at the definition of foreclosure seems to vary depending on who you ask. I think when we're talking about real estate, I think that foreclosure is the legal process by which an owner's rights to a property are removed, due to an unpaid debt or a lien, some kind of a balance or an amount that's owed that hasn't been paid. Now, when we think of foreclosure, we probably think of different things, but really there are two different types of foreclosure, the very specific types, and it's important to understand the difference between the two. Non-judicial foreclosure. When we mention the word foreclosure, this is what most people think of, or this is what comes to mind. This is the most common type of foreclosure. This is what would typically involve a borrower, a lender. It would be like a bank foreclosure. When we think about somebody not paying on their mortgage and being foreclosed on, what we're looking at there is a non-judicial foreclosure. What exactly does that mean? Well, first off, it means that a non-judicial foreclosure, we're talking, if you just look at the root words there, it's basically a foreclosure that's done through state laws and one that's not done through state laws. A non-judicial foreclosure that we see with most most home mortgage situations happens because when you sign a mortgage contract, you're basically waiving your rights to a judicial foreclosure, meaning a foreclosure that goes through the state laws. You're signing those away. There's what's called a power of sale stipulation. It gives the lenders the power to bypass that whole judicial foreclosure process and be able to foreclose on your property in a shorter period of time. It makes sense for them because it enables them to foreclose faster, costing them less money. You also, however, though, you agree to the non-payment terms. So basically, you're agreeing to a new set of terms under which your property can be foreclosed on. But that's why whenever we think about a standard foreclosure, it's usually involving a bank or a lender, and then kind of them stepping in and taking out the property. However, the actual judicial foreclosure is the one that all the counties deal with. This is the one that you'll be dealing with on a regular basis, and this is also part of the reason why tax sales are such a good opportunity compared to the non-judicial foreclosures. When we're talking about a judicial foreclosure, what we're really talking about is foreclosure as it exists according to state laws. So, in other words, just like property tax enforcement, foreclosure laws are determined by state. There are a lot of similarities between how different states operate when they with their foreclosure laws. What really distinguishes some states from others, or what separates them, makes them different, is based on the timelines that are involved with the foreclosure process and some of the notice requirements. But really, when you're looking at the state laws, and if you've never read any of the state laws before regarding property tax enforcement, regarding foreclosure, it's interesting to do. If you're spending a lot of time within a certain state, it's worth the time to look up and read some of these laws. But what you'll find when you begin reading them is that the state is going to outline some very specific steps that need to be followed in order to foreclose on this property. And those steps will usually involve a set period of time for foreclosure notices to go out, and before foreclosure can be actually initiated. And it requires that notices go out through some type of a certified system. In other words, it needs to be able to be proven that they were sent out. And aside from that, they go out to to the individuals that are listed on the records. So the county basically sends out that information by certified mail to those parties, because what it's trying to do is it's trying to give anybody that has financial interest in the property the opportunity to do something before they lose any ownership rights to the property. And that's because really what the foreclosure process is all about is extinguishing any ownership rights to a property. So when the foreclosure process is executed, that's typically what it does. It extinguishes their rights to the property as long as the party doing the foreclosing has, as long as they've followed the state laws, they've used the correct timelines, they've sent the notices out by certified mail to all the parties that needed to receive it. When all of that stuff is done correctly, the property is foreclosed on, and in most cases, nearly anything attached to the property is extinguished. So that would include a lot of things. That would include things like the property owner's rights, the lender's rights. Even if there was a lender that was involved and if they held the note on the property and they didn't respond, they would get foreclosed on just like anybody else would. Now, let's see here. If we're talking about judicial foreclosure and this foreclosure through the state laws, what exactly can survive the process? What liens or what claims have the ability to survive that process? And really, when it comes to a lot of this stuff, there's no set answer because we're talking about 50 different states. So you really have to dig into a lot of the state laws in order to find out any specifics. For instance, New Mexico has certain things written within their laws that allow certain types of mortgages to survive the foreclosure process. That would be a big problem if you're an investor. If you're looking for what else can survive the foreclosure process, there are really only a handful of things in most cases that will survive the foreclosure process. They are typically other types of liens or claims that have been issued by another government agency. So we could be talking about some type of municipal fees or a municipal lien, or some type of a federal lien or federal problem with the property. In most cases, you've seen before counties that list properties if they have some type of an issue like an IRS lien. The county would list that there. So counties are typically pretty good about listing a lot of this stuff, but you can't really rely on them to do it. So what we're trying to determine here is if there's anything that could survive the foreclosure process, so that when you're the new owner of the property, there's something that you're supposed to pay before you can, some type of a bill that's owed on the property. You want to make sure that you stay out of that you don't owe anything when the property's owed, or that there's something there that you know about what it is and you're aware of it before you buy, so that you can compensate for it.
Yeah, for example, like Florida, if you were investing in a condominium, well, the law has changed recently, and even though they don't allow it, there's some HOAs that are making it difficult for tax deed investors. And so if you're looking at a condo, you might want to contact the association and find out if there's any fees due, and if they try to make an issue of it after the sale has taken place. Now, if those fees may only be $400 or $500, well, you can work that into your bid price, into your minimum bid, and expect to pay that. But as long as you know about that up front, it's not going to be a shock to you after you purchase the property.
Good question here. What about mechanics liens for most states? That's a good question as to whether or not a mechanics lien would survive the foreclosure process. I know in some cases states make allowance for it, but I think in other cases, it's extinguished.
Yeah, in most cases, in 99% of the cases, it would be extinguished, and especially if we're talking about a foreclosure where you're attending a tax deed sale, because by the time you attend the tax deed sale, that property has already been foreclosed on.
Yeah.
With tax liens, you would figure that out beforehand, but with tax deeds, usually that had been taken care of.
Yeah. So, in other words, would you buy the property to find out that there was a mechanics lien that still existed? Probably not. That's not something that would typically survive the foreclosure process in most states. But there's
And
always
and and
exceptions.
if it would, they would usually. I mean, if there was some type of a small mechanics lien or something like that, that would be in the opening bid price. If it was going to survive, usually the county would, include that or anyone that is owed money to the property when they set that opening bid price for the auction.
Yeah, basically, what we're trying to determine and find out here, when we're looking at, when we're doing title searches, when we're trying to find any information about the property, what we're really trying to determine is if there's a situation that's come up where maybe in government sometimes you get situations where one aspect of government doesn't know what another aspect of government is doing. And so, maybe you have a county government which kind of controls the county, but then you also have smaller governments within there that may have their own additional fees or things like that that may come up. And in some cases, maybe basically one party's not communicating with another so well. That's what we want to try to find out if there was some type of an issue like that. The other thing that we want to determine and find out as well is uh, how long it's been since a property was purchased, and when it was purchased, when the last warranty deed was issued on the property. Because in order for a property to be sold with a warranty deed, they have to go through and do a number of steps there. They have to get when they get title insurance, they go through a number of steps there, and you want to be able to trace that back and determine when the last time was that occurred, because that really is what's going to determine how complicated or simple the process will be when it comes to trying to go through quiet title action to get a warranty deed on the property. It's going to kind of fall in with some of the other things we're going to talk about here in just a minute. But like Steve said, the other thing are some of the HOA fees. In Florida, I know that it can be more of an issue, but Florida's got a lot of HOAs. And so that's something that you could find out, because essentially what the HOAs have tried to do is to allow the HOAs have tried to claim that certain things are surviving the foreclosure process. So in other words, a property's foreclosed on, they say, well, we still have X amount of money that's owed in fees, and that's been the chief argument in a lot of the court cases so far. And yeah, so another question is, do the municipalities normally announce if a survivable lien is attached to the property as an IRS lien? Yeah, normally if there is something like a federal lien that's placed against the property, um, just because there's an IRS lien against the property doesn't necessarily mean the IRS is going to utilize the property for whatever it is they're trying to do. If a property comes up for a tax sale and ends up going to auction, sometimes the county will pull properties, but oftentimes they don't know what's happening with the IRS lien, and the IRS may not really. They could have placed a lien against the property, but they haven't taken any action to try to do something about it. So counties, in fact, I think most of the time counties will make you aware of that. They'll list somewhere, if there is an IRS lien against the property, so that you would be aware of it, and you'd understand what you needed to do, once you purchased it. Because really what it comes down to is that the IRS, if they have placed a lien, whoever the organization is that has placed a lien against the property, they either have to act on the lien or they have to let it go, but they can't just let it hang in limbo. But yeah, they'll almost always tell you. They're pretty good about something as big as an IRS lien, because that might really change how a person looks at the investment. I mean, to be honest, if I look at something that has an IRS lien, I typically move on.
In fact, I was looking at a list today in California, and on the one of the columns, has IRS lien, and there was a few properties that had an IRS lien, and it was listed right there, so that you were aware of it.
Yeah, yeah, and we're kind of creating. We've got this little checklist here, and if everything makes sense with these properties, it makes sense to place bids. But one of the factors that we need to determine is your exit strategy. Why does that matter? Why is it important? I think when you go to buy these properties, knowing what your exit strategy is may have an effect on which properties you select, which ones you make the decision to buy. Also, depending on what your exit strategy is, well, if your exit strategy is short term, then I guess just think about this: the more you can set up beforehand, the more um, if you're looking to sell something immediately to a buyer, one of the best ways to do that is to establish a relationship with the buyer and to get an idea for what they like to buy. What it is that that they're interested in purchasing, and if you're looking for ways that you can find places that are looking that will buy property, there are a lot of companies everywhere. We're talking nationwide and local alike. Lots of companies that specialize in buying homes, paying cash for properties, paying cash for properties for distressed homes. They might say a lot of that is uh, lingo for properties with title issues, or properties that certainly behind on payments. Maybe they are ones that would step in and pay you, some type of a fee to walk away from a property in some type of a pre-foreclosure situation. Um, Whatever it is, there are lots of groups like that, and they're really pretty easy to find. In fact, if you're last night, uh, if you type in sell home in whatever city, you'll typically pull up a number of different options there, and a few of those options will be places that are offering to buy properties, and you can actually fill it out. I mean, a lot of the stuff you can do online and get quotes from these companies, from these places. And what you're trying to determine, if that's the case, is about what they're willing to pay for properties, so that as you go to look for properties, about what your profit margins are, based on what you believe they'll pay for specific properties. So knowing your exit strategy ahead of time is going to help you quite a bit, especially if I mean, for instance, if you're looking for something long term, then its ability to be rented out quickly would be a big factor. If you could find a property, one that's close to being rented out versus one that's going to need a little bit more work, that one that's close to being rented out is going to be far better, uh, because it's that much closer to being able to generate regular income for you. Now, setting your maximum bid, we've had some questions about this lately, and setting your maximum bid is something that you really set with a percentage, just like you do when you're looking for properties that catch your eye, like the 10% we're looking at. You can set a percentage, whether and it's, I guess it's up to you, but you can set a percentage the same way. So if 10% is a number that catches your eye for a property, you could do 25% as a maximum, or 30% as a maximum, whatever it is. You probably don't want to bid really much above 30%, just because the whole idea behind buying tax deeds is to get that big discount. It's to buy them for a fraction of what they're worth, and so there's no point in really paying more than that for a property, because if it's going to sell for more than that, you can always wait and pick something else up for a lower price. What we're looking for are properties that sell for 30% and less. You could say of estimated value, and I would say that's a pretty. I guess you can set the exact percentage yourself, but I think that's a pretty fair number to look at. And by the way, so that makes sense to everybody. Um, for instance, we're looking at a property here that has an opening bid, we could say, of 5,000, estimated value of 50,000. If this property originally caught our eye because it has a 10% bid to value ratio, we could set a percentage like 25%, which in this case would be 12,500. And so we would automatically know that it opens up at 5,000, but we can bid it up to our maximum bid would be 12,500. Would be the most we were willing to pay for that property. That's an easy way to set maximum bid amounts. And be consistent with it. I think more important than anything is just being consistent with it, selling something the same time every time. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of examples here. Some of the properties that have sold here, and we actually had a lot of big sales here taking place. In fact, what I'm kind of interested in looking at here, first thing I want to do is just look at some of the results here from the sales that have taken place. People have picked up some properties for some pretty good prices. I want to see how this sale turned out here. This is the Duval County sale. This is the sale where they started off with about 300 properties listed for sale. I think when I looked last, they had still maybe 240. We're going to go through the auction. So let's take a look and see what some of the auction results were for today. We can get an idea. Oh, interesting. All right. So the Domino's Pizza. I'm pretty sure this is the Domino's Pizza. Domino's Pizza sold for $50,000 to a third-party bidder. It opened up at 43.
That's an awesome deal.
Yeah, seriously. Yeah, let's take a look. Yep, that would be the one. It sold for $50,000 to a third-party bidder, and you're talking about a fully functional. In fact, I'd like to see inside that place because I wouldn't be surprised if it's still full of all the equipment. All right, so that sold for $50,000. Crazy. That's one of the nicer commercial properties, at least as far as like a commercial property that couldn't be any more commercial. Seeing something like that go up for sale, that's pretty neat. All right, so let's see here. And you'll always find lots of odd examples. Lots of cases. It's hard to take just any single result. What you're looking for really when you're looking at the past results for sales are for general trends or patterns. So far, that first that deal with the Domino's Pizza is the best thing we've seen so far. And that Domino's Pizza, they had an assessed value of $274,000 on that property, but it could easily be worth quite a bit more than that. I mean, when we were looking at it, the estimates on value could easily be the high 300s to even low 400s. It's just kind of hard to determine quickly value on a commercial property. Again, we're seeing a lot of these that went to certificate holders, but that's not necessarily surprising. A lot of these, that went to certificate holders were maybe pieces of raw land, and pieces of land that didn't have that high of an assessed value. So when it doesn't have that high of an assessed value, that at least makes sense. This is a property that ended up going to certificate holder. That's a single family home, but it went for $18,000. Let's look around, and I'm sure we'll see some pretty amazing deals here. Because one thing that's pretty obvious already is that there wasn't a huge number of bidders, just like we said there wouldn't be. We said last week that there would be probably a limited number of bidders at this auction, and the properties would sell for pretty close to the opening bid amounts. And so far, we haven't seen anything.
See, that one sold to a third bidder for just over.
Yeah, both of these sold for a little over the opening bid amounts. That's on Miss Muffet Lane. I live on Miss Muffet Lane. All right, let's take a look and see what that is. Okay, so we've got one of them right here. It's that house right there. And that's not too bad. That image is from May of 2013, so we're looking at an image that's maybe a year old. Not too bad. Let's take a look, and that's the one that sold for $8,600, opened up for $6,200. And if we wanted to look at a Zillow value on it, just to see how close the Zillow value is to being on. Yes, we'll see the difference between the county value and the Zillow value. So Zillow is estimating it at 45,000, and county's estimating it at 35,000. So somewhere in between, you could say that it basically sold for $8,000. Is estimated to be worth 40,000 right now, roughly 45,000. Let's see
What does it rent out for a month? Did Zillow say?
811 is what they're saying.
So for about $800 a month. So within a year, this property would pay for itself if you were renting it out.
Yeah, I really would. And this property, which sold for 9,800, it opened up at 8,300, sold for 9,800. Let's see what it is. And there we go. It's another. Oh, it's actually right next door. Look at this. Isn't that the house? No, that's not the house we were just looking at. Different design. Okay, so we've got this house right here. It sold for 9,800, and let's see. Let's see what it's estimated to be worth here with Zillow. And you're looking at. I don't know why they don't show the estimated value here on this. Last estimated value they had on it was 50,000, and that was kind of like it's really never gone below that much. It'd be over 100,000. And let's see here. I mean, there's going to be a lot of these, and I doubt we're going to see anything that sold for a real high amount. If we do, there's only going to be a few, because it looks like there were just enough bidders there to pay opening bids on a lot of these. I think this one didn't get a bid. Man, that's a little house. And that one was for 8,600. Didn't get a bid.
Looks like it's on a quiet street.
Yeah. This one sold to a third-party bidder. Let's see what else we see here. Lots of properties. This one sold to. Somebody really wanted this one. This one actually bid up a bit. This one opened up at 88,000. It opened up at 8,000 and sold for 24. But it has an assessed value with the county of 64,000. So it's this house right here. That's a nice little house. I can see why it sold for a little more.
Yeah, it's you've got the full covered carport. It's brick.
Mm-hmm.
I'll bet it has a higher value too. It looks like it's in a little bit better
estimated to be
neighborhood.
worth 100,000. So that's why somebody was willing to pay a little bit more for it.
I mean, you can see even the homes next to it are in better condition, and so I'm sure the neighbors would like to have somebody in there cleaned up and rented or sell.
It's a little bit higher income neighborhood, or at least years ago it was newer. It was a newer neighborhood, little upscale homes. That's not bad though. It's a pretty nice little property. And this one was bid from 7,700 to 11,600. Let's take a look and see. like some little house in there. And any others? This one, well, we'll look at a couple others here. Interesting. I always think it's interesting to see what these properties end up selling for, especially one like this where we knew it was going to be a good opportunity.
Well, and in every one of the scenarios where it bids up, that means that there was at least 2 people that did research and that were interested in the property.
You know, this property sold for $16,000. It opened up for $8,000. Might be a multi-unit though.
It's in multi-unit area, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, they're estimated to be worth $58,000. Let's see. Let's take a look and see what else. Look for anything that really jumps out as a great deal. I think it's still on mute, Steve.
Oh.
Let's see here. Let's take a look. This one went to certificate holder. Let's see what it is. So it didn't get a bid. That little house, a little rough. Now, this is another one that didn't get a bid. You know, when they don't get bids, you have to wonder if it's because there's some type of a problem with them, or, you know, did they just get overlooked? And it can really be for either one. Oh, that's nice.
It could be because they're a little bit rougher, you know, or
I can't.
and there was a lot of properties to choose from.
That one
that
did
one's
not
really
get a
not
bid.
Too bad.
Yeah, that one did not get a bid, and it was that's a year old, that image. And let's see, the amount on that was $7,000. So that had an opening bid of $7,000, and and that looks clean. You can tell that it's been lived in more recently, and $53,000. So, you know, that thing had an opening bid that was probably like, you know, 12-15% of what it's estimated to be worth, and it didn't get an opening bid. Looks like they're over on the side of it. Yeah, that's not bad. Oh yeah, yeah. Joanna said that one of them said, you know, redeemed after the sale. Sometimes you find weird things like that, and I don't know whether it's something where they knew that a property was, you know, looked like it was going to redeem, or what happens. But sometimes counties will pull properties. Sometimes they'll have, you know, say they redeemed after the sale. You know, they seem to give them some leeway. You know, if somebody's trying to pay off the taxes, they certainly will give them every, every opportunity to do it. I'm not sure how that worked though. If they held the sale, or if they probably just pulled the property from the sale, and then, you know, I'm sure they didn't offer it if they believed it was going to redeem, or maybe it did redeem and somebody just paid it off right away. Who knows? So that's a pretty remarkable one. This one didn't get a bid. Let's see, at $8,200, it didn't get a bid. Let's see if it's anything good. Looks like
kind of looks
workable.
Yeah, just the property itself just needs a little cleanup. Looks like it could be rented. It could be more than one unit too.
Yeah, and there are
There's
a ton
two
of
front
these.
doors.
Between the price range of like from 5 to 8,000, you know, 9,000, there are just a ton of these that are there that didn't get minimum bid amounts. Let's see what this one is. You know, I think the county is actually the ones that board these up. Because if you notice, they're all boarded up kind of the same way.
Yeah, the county probably did it when they were foreclosing on the properties, and really, I would rather have it boarded up because that means that nobody's getting into it, and squatting or vandalizing or anything like that.
I wonder if there will be any over-the-counter opportunities with some of these.
It very, very well could be. I can check and see, get their list of lands and see if there are some properties. On some of the list of lands that I got last week from Florida, there were single-family homes on them.
Yeah, that's another one that didn't get a bid right there for 7,000. And I mean, and we're on page 10 of 31. I mean, there are 31 pages of this, and here's one that was canceled as per bankruptcy, canceled as per bankruptcy, third party bidder. Let's look for anything here that really jumps out. We've got certificate holder. This one sold to a third party bidder. We'll take a look maybe at this and see if it's any good. Oh, interesting. I'll bet it's that right there.
That'd be pretty nice.
Yeah, I'll bet. Let's see if that's a commercial property. Let's see, shop center, neighborhood, Washington Heights.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that could totally be it. Let's see here. Okay. See if it'll map it for me or if it's going to make me enter in a new number. Oh, there we go. Yeah, you can see it's a corner lot. Oh, that's kind of weird. I wonder if it's... Now that we can see that it's a corner lot... Oh, yeah, it is this gas station. Because you can see kind of how the gas station, how this thing is set up with that road behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is that gas station. So that gas station sold for $14,000. That's crazy. It's not even a gas station. It's more just like
it's a convenience store, corner store.
Convenience store. But that's not a bad location. I mean, it looks like you've got some kind of a school or
probably
something.
A lot of foot traffic.
Yeah, you've got a school right across the street. You've got all of this housing. I mean, this is a nice area, pretty busy, and it looks like it's on a good intersection. This looks like a good road to be on. That's pretty crazy that they picked that up for $14,000. Oh, this one looks like this one has a high value. This one had an opening bid of $7,900, ended up selling for $82, so it sold for $300 over what it opened up for. But it has a higher assessed value. Let's see what this is. Maybe it's a building lot?
Yeah.
Let's see what it says. Vacant residential.
It's an expensive lot, though, if you're looking at a building lot.
Yeah, that is a pretty nice lot.
And if you look at the overhead on Google, you can see that it's in a new type of neighborhood.
Yeah.
Might be gated or something like that.
Yeah, and I'm sure we get. I mean, if you were interested in buying a lot, we could look and see. It's probably. I don't know if it's this entire corner section right here, but it's certainly a building lot right there. And certificate holder. There are really so many of these to ignore any of these that don't look spectacular and oh, this one right here. Okay, this went for 5,000. This for 5,600 was the opening bid on this. Its assessed value is about 30,000, and it didn't get a bid. Let's see what we're looking at. So that's a $5,000 house right there. It didn't get a bid. Lots and lots. Here's another $5,000 house that didn't get a bid, I'll bet. Oh, it did get a. You're still on mute. Yeah, I think you're still on mute. Okay, so it's this house right there.
Looking at a $5,000 home, that's a nice $5,000 home. You can see it even has, handicap or wheelchair access.
Yeah. Yeah, let's take a look and see what it's estimated to be worth here. They're estimated to be worth 44,000. So you're looking at a home that was opening up for 10% of what it's estimated to be worth, and it didn't get an opening bid. And the
You can
rent
also
estimate on
see,
it is $700 a month. So, it's like for 5 grand, that thing could have itself paid off there pretty quick, I'll bet.
well, it looks like it's close to schools or something, because you can see tennis courts and a bunch of buildings.
Another question here is how difficult is it to get a foreclosed homeowner out of the house in Florida after you get the deed? It's not hard at all. Think about this. Most of the horror stories that you hear about like squatters or whatnot, that's a situation where you're looking at more like a bank foreclosure. With a judicial foreclosure like this, it's straightforward. If there's anybody in the property after the property's been foreclosed on, they're trespassing, and the sheriff will gladly, kick them out of the property. I mean, this is a foreclosure that's done according to state law, and it doesn't leave any room for anybody to squat. So it should just be a matter of contacting the county after the sale and having them send somebody over. And let's say like that convenient mart, interesting situation. I mean, who knows? I mean, in most of these cases, you're probably not going to have something like an operating business, that's still working out of it. A lot of times, there isn't still somebody in the home, but if there is, then you could kick them out. But if you've still got somebody operating a business, like let's say you've got a convenience store owner in there, you essentially own the property. You could work out something for payments if there's something that's already there. I mean, you could essentially start collecting money immediately without doing anything. That might be something to look into. But if it came down to getting somebody out of the property, that's something that can be done pretty easily just by contacting the local sheriff.
Yeah, and if the convenience store, let's say that's being rented, and it was owned by somebody else, they might just continue renting from you and pay you the rental payments, and the property owner just didn't worry about it, and it went to tax deed sale. Then you could start renting the property out and start getting those rental payments for the commercial property. Or if there is a single family home and there's renters in there and you wanted to rent the property anyway, you could continue renting to them. In some of the Michigan sales, there's renters in some of the properties that are coming up for auction, and they have in the notes that the renter would like to stay if they can, and they're paying $700 a month or whatever. And so in that scenario, if you'd like to just continue renting out the property after purchasing it, you can go ahead and do that and start generating residual income immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. This property, it's $7,000. It didn't get an opening bid. And it's not a bad little home. And you can see that it would work out pretty well probably as a little rental property. It's not a little bad property to have for $7,000, and Zillow estimate on it right now is 45,000. And it has the capacity to be worth a little more than that, but it has I think the main thing with it is that it has the ability to bring in a regular monthly payment every single month. I mean, for that low of a price, for a $7,000 bid, for the ability to pick something up that could generate $700 a month roughly, that's incredible. It's incredible that you can buy something for that low of a price and that it can make that kind of money. I mean, that's just
On the notes on that property, you can see that before the auction was taking place, they were trying to short sell the property. It's already occupied,
right there.
currently occupied by Section 8 tenant for 2 years. Tenant requested to continue to live there with new owner.
Mm-hmm.
Tenant pays the maintenance on the home. attached property. So, I mean, in that scenario, we're just talking about a rental property. Whoever purchased this tax deed, or if it went to the certificate holder, was this property sold, Shade?
Yeah. This one ended up to a third party bidder.
Yeah, so this whoever bought this property for $7,100 already has a Section 8, already approved for Section 8 with a Section 8 tenant that they can start renting to immediately.
Yeah, that's an interesting scenario, that's already lined up, and that's where we're reading it right there is they listed some of this information on Zillow, for as a short sale, trying to find a buyer. But I mean, it very well could be that tenant is still there, that the tenant has been there for a while. And if it's
Yeah, they were probably trying to short sell it, trying to sell it before the auction, uh, so that they wouldn't lose the property. And
yeah,
so they were probably trying to sell it, and if it lost it, then they lost it. But that's probably what they were doing. So I would imagine that the tenant's still in there.
yeah, and if it's already approved and set up on Section 8 housing, and the tenants used to paying Section 8 housing, you could probably get it set up like that again if you wanted to have Section 8 housing, and then that a certain portion of the rent is automatically covered by essentially by a government check. So that's what Section 8 housing is, basically the government subsidized housing. And if property qualifies for it, then the tenants that come in pay a certain percentage, and the government pays a certain percentage on it. And question that James has, is can you wholesale a property with a tenant in there? And yeah, I think you're ultimately the owner of the property. You buy the ownership rights to it. Even in a situation like this, they're basically saying, the tenant's requesting, to live there, if they can, but it's still going to be the property owner's decision. So, you could still do, you could still sell the property, off if you wanted to. I mean, ultimately, it's still yours. But I guess the advantage of having the tenant there is, if you've got a long-term tenant that pays well, then it can at least just save you the effort of needing to go out and find a tenant and get a tenant to move in, and and having the property all ready to go. It just basically bypasses a lot of things. Normally if you were to buy it, you'd probably need to send somebody in, figure out what needs to be done in the property to make it rentable. Once you've got that stuff done, then you need to get it listed. Then you need to probably hire a property management company to help you get somebody in there filling it, and they can start paying rent on it. This just allows you to bypass all of that and just go directly to the I can collect your money. It's kind of crazy. It's like you buy something for $7,000 and you could automatically step in and start making, they start paying you $700 a month after that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy. Well, I think we're just about out of time here, and I don't want to let it go extra long here, so I can get the recording up faster. You can send any questions you have over to us, support@propertytaxlist.com. You can send it to me, or Steven at propertytaxlist.com with the PH, and we can answer any questions for you. But if we're looking again at what some of those at the checklist there of items here. Let me just find this slide here. There we go. So the due diligence checklist here, the primary things that we need: county public records. A lot of these things are just to determine what the property is. We want to verify that the property's still there. We want to do some comps on it, a title search to expose any potential issues, and then we want to set our maximum bid. And we talked about a lot what a lot of the potential risks are, complications with titles, and ownership history. We talked about a lot of different things here. Yeah, if there are any additional questions on anything that you're doing, please let us know. There are lots of sales, though. If you take a look, there are sales coming up here over the coming weeks. And if that last sale that we just reviewed is any indication, there is still a ton of opportunity out there. Every single person that's on the line tonight could have been on that sale and probably picked up a couple of properties. It's just there's not so much competition yet to where you can't still find some great deals. So, I think it's just a matter of getting registered for a few different auctions and placing some minimum bids. Sometimes minimum bids enough. So, all right. Well, again, we appreciate doing this. Thanks for joining us, guys, and we look forward to doing it next week. So we'll see everybody then.